Before I read these next couple chapters, I want to talk about a couple things. I know I get frustrated. I'm extremely frustrated. I'm frustrated in so many ways. There's so many of you out there that watch these are frustrated. You know, I have to come back to, how can we not be frustrated? How can anybody? This entire YouTube vlog of mine, my post-ignorance book, my Ballad of Cement, my big, broad, huge novel, my nuclear punks versus nuclear capital P-U punks, is all oppositional resistance art. Every fiber of it. That's what it is. It is a pure art movement. It has been from day one. You know, it was incorporated into a PhD study. It encompasses everything. That's what this is. I'm trying to put a thumbprint on how we got here, why we're here, and how we counter off it. This is a synopsis in why, when, how, where. This is the breadth. It has to have foundation. It has to have structure. It has to have encompass all. Before I read these next cut, I'm going to read the rest. This week I'll have all my post-ignorance back up. I have to get back because I get frustrated and I go off, you know, because I do have this scatterbrain of mine that I have to deal with every day. You know I love this spot, and I let the cat out of the bag why I love this spot. Finally, after all these things, right there, as we have so much smoke, it's been saw. That's Majestic Mountain. That is Ben Lomond Peak. Named, the Federal Reserve is named after Mariner Eccles. They're his people from the slums of Glasgow, Scotland. That's what this is. You know, all the guys come at me with the Fed. I've exposed it. That's the significance of this spot. That is the logo. It was drawn right here. So anyway, I want to read this because I think this needs to be part of this post-ignorance as the oppositional art with Pussy Riot that's going on right now. I think this statement that was read in the closing arguments is so incredibly, magnificently, beautiful written. I think it is so powerful. As again, it is not their protest. Their subject matter was nothing even very, you know, protest put whoopie-doo. It is the genre. It is the medium. It is these cameras. It is these cameras. It is the social fabric of YouTube and social media bringing us together. And I think this is such an important time for Russia and the United States to be able, its people, as we've been propaganda on both sides, to hate each other for all those years, which is absolute horribly ridiculous, including Germany, including Japan. This is such a beautiful time for us to come together. To come together as people and quit letting the 1% throw a wedge and make us hate each other for no reason, as we've both been propagandists so hard. We were so propaganda as youth here. I look back on it. Part of my PhD study, I went around and I asked people the definition of communism. Whew, they have no clue when right here in Utah was deeply, you know, I poured out my book that Brigham Young was a communist in so many ways. He experimented with it. And, you know, I'll break that down in my bigger book. But anyway, I'm going to read the rest of my post-ignorance, get back to yesterday. I participated in the Dash for Donors, which was so emotional yesterday. Wow. Young people that have committed suicide right here. We have a major suicide epidemic here, as Freud said. Repressive societies will fail, and rightfully so. We are a repressive society here. And that is why I say some families of young men who have committed suicide, who have donated their body parts, who joined together and raised money to help other people. It was so emotional, really emotional, because we have a major suicide epidemic right here where I sit. Why? Repression. Essentially, it is not the three singers from Pussy Riot who are on trial here. If that were the case, what's happened would be totally insignificant. Is the entire state system of the Russian Federation, which is on trial, and which unfortunately for itself thoroughly enjoys quoting its cruelty towards human beings, its indifference to the honor and dignity, the very worst that has happened in Russian history to date. To my deepest regret, this mock trial is close to the standards of the Stalin totalities. Thus, we have our investigators, lawyer, and judge. And then what's more, what all three of them do and say and decide by is determined by a political demand for repression. Who is to blame for the performance of the Cathedral of the Christ, the Savior, and for being put on trial after the concert? The authoritarian political system is to blame. What Pussy Riot does is oppositional art or politics that draws upon the forms art has established. In any event, it is the form of civil action in circumstances where basic human rights, civil and political freedoms are suppressed by the corporate state system. Pussy Riot Closing Arguments, 2012, August 2012, powerful. Back to my book. Chapter 9, Home, Hapless, and Happy. Home, Homeless, or Happy. After the tragic deaths of my father and Dr. Cooley, I continued to trade derivatives. I was in total shock and an emotional wreck. The derivative markets gave me shelter. I knew the 3 Palms spin-out was coming soon, very soon. The arbitrage between the prices of Palms, expected IPO, expected price, and the price of 3Com was getting ridiculous. I knew that Palm was going to be one red-hot IPO. Palm was the smartphone king, and I would smell a revolution coming in regard to the cell phone. It was already there. I was hammering 3Com in the options markets. I had everyone I know buying calls on 3Com. I had limited out on 3Com in my accounts. In mid-January, the street finally awoke and said arbitrage scenario, and the 3Com started to move fast. My accounts were going crazy. I had turned just a couple thousand of dollars into my accounts to close to $1 million. The private equity firm I was working for was making millions on my trades. I had dozens of friends making large scores. Finally the day was set, March 10, 2000. In those days I kept a small artist sketch pad in my pocket all the time. I have been and always have been an artist first. Of course, the derivatives market and the hypothesizing the dynamics of the markets isn't art. And I had sketched in my tablet and carried in with me the number 150 in my mind and had visualized that it has been the opening price of Palm. Somewhere along the Wall Street forgot that it was and is an art and turned it into the math PhD geeks with a computer program, the flash crash, etc. 85% of all trades are computer programs traded. Remember, I wrote this over 2 years ago. As the said Palm 3Com spin was approaching, the market NASDAQ had begun to capitulate. The great run was coming to an end, like all mobbed up casinos. In the garage, billionaires being made out of simple ideas with no assets or even a business model. One day in '98, I was with my boss Anthony, who I asked him, who is getting all the pre-IPOs? It had become a guaranteed way to make millions for nothing. The way the IPO market works in the investment bank is the investment bankers. Saks, the biggest of course, and the others private place the offering via investors. The pre-market price is set at, let's say, $15, and then over the next few weeks investors sign up to get a set amount. The investment bankers promote and watch to see how much interest is in the said public offering. In the late 90s they just sat back and watched the public institutions line up. It is called oversubscribed. They were all oversubscribed in the late 90s. So then a couple days before the IPO hits the market and is offered trading by anyone, the investment makers set the price. This price is the price all the subscribers will pay. They set it at, let's say, 10 million shares at $23 a share. The company going public is instantly worth $230 million in theory. But in the late 90s, everyone knew almost every IPO opened at a giant premium, higher than the subscribers had paid for it. Remember, the subscribers put no money up front. They are set a statement and going to the IPO the first day of the trading. Then they have to, what is called T+3 to pay for it, that which means 4 days to pay for it. So at the opening day, they simply sell off the open market and trading is paid for in a huge profit with no money, not one piece of asset being put up. Wealth being created out of thin air. Not one dime putting up front. I said to Anthony, who is getting all the IPOs? We used to get them. We don't get them anymore. And we are a fairly large firm, and I know for a fact the private investors is getting none of them. He said the Wall Street mob is getting them, all of Saks and their friends, like IAG was free millions to billions. Every week billionaires were being made from millionaires. The inside of the very people putting the deals together, the investment banks, Goldman Sachs and others. This same month Dr. Matson came to me. Remember, I still need to make up classes for my undergraduate degree, and I'm basically teaching the 2-week MBA classes. I was teaching right here at the MBA level on the death of Dr. Clyde Cooley. I didn't even they were holding me back on 2 classes on my undergraduate, and here I'm teaching it at the #1 MBA program in the country, and I'm teaching it. That's how absurd it was. For my undergraduate degree, and I basically teach in the MBA classes. He came to me in the Wattis lab. I was pouring over analytical numbers for the next few days earnings reports were due out. Well, after the market had closed, I spent all my time in the lab for the next few months. I was heartbroken over my father's death. And he said to me, I have a relative who's CEO whose company is going public. I have a chance to get 1,000 shares in the IPO market. Should I do it? Now remember, this is the guy teaching the investment class, God bless him, who died at 55 years old of lung cancer, which I absolutely loved. He and I used to go back to Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting every year. Buffett knew me personally. I have a picture over here with Buffett with his arm around me, because I walked through the line one day and I told Mr. Buffett, you know what I say about you having a bad year? And he says, what's that? And I says, even Babe Ruth had slumps. He loved me for that. I wonder if Buffett still remembers it. I do, but they had a picture. But anyway, that's another story. Who is the company? He's told me. It was a well-established actual earning tech company. And any of you tech options players, that was me, the Yahoo name Good Earnings Only. When you guys used to go back in those websites, back in the old days, and there was a guy posting all the time, a hypothesis, and I was making huge scores. People were like, this guy, Good Earnings Only, when I had it spelled wrong. That was me. That was me. Remember all this. Remember all the shit everyone gave me for spelling it wrong. Go Mets. I said you are nuts. Of course you should buy it. That IPO will open at least a 50% premium. You do not have to hold it. You could sell it at the open. There was no restrictions on the IPO. This is a man that had been inherited a large chunk of Merck stock from his father and had completely fell in love and married the stock. I had heard for months now I would never buy any of those tech companies. They are too risky. I just keep my Merck. He told me that over and over and over. I just shake my head. A very conservative investor, almost to a flaw. This country is full of them. It works very little less than people think that we do not live forever. For us, shit does happen. And besides, what are you going to do with all that money when you turn 70 years old? Buy diapers and Viagra? I told him, here I'm struggling through the death of my father, teaching Clyde's classes as a favor to you for free, and you're teaching the investment class, or should I say I'm teaching it, and you need advice from me. You're the man with the PhD, not me. He said, but I know nothing about the investment banking world in practice. I just check the box, yes, and I will put in the watch screen and come on back to buy and hand you and sell. I told her, just check that box and say yes, I'll hold your hand. You do have an online account? No, what is that? I have a broker at Smith Barney. Who is it? He told me one of the dumbest, laziest people I've ever known, a pure car salesman, like all stockbrokers are car salesmen. Well, let me call him. So I called him, and I told him he needs to get his lazy your lazy ass out of bed the morning of the offering when it hits the market. We don't operate like that, he told me, and hung up on me. We operate in the long run. Yeah, in the long run. I went to zero. I said, shut the fuck up with your entire ignorant, know-nothing redirects. He hung up on me. I have a very close friend on Wall Street that was an executive vice president at Smith Solomon Barty at the time. I called him. He said, just call me in the morning. I will handle the trade. So I took Clyde by his hand and helped him subscribe. He got 500 of the 1,000 he subscribed for. And I made the call in the opening, and he made $10,000 for nothing. He was happy. Over the next month, the Wattis Lab was hopping with finance students, trading the Palm 3Com arbitrage, dozens of them, making tens of thousands a week from small cash outlay, following my lead. Finally, the week of the IPO and the pre-market price was set after being raised 4 times that week. The pre-price was $42. It had started at $14, then it was $28, then $34 just days earlier. I had a very good trading knowledge and info that it would open well over $100. And I made phone calls to every investment banker I ever met on Wall Street, some of them extremely intelligent men. I had very good knowledge and the gut that it would open north of 150. I stayed with my gut in my sketchbook. I had written 150 months earlier, and it was the most oversubscribed IPO in history. The market was capitulation. The NASDAQ was over 5,000, peaking at 5,048, closing price March 10th, 2000. The 3Com shareholders were to get 1.5 shares of Palm for every share of the 3Com. This is something that is non-debatable. That is how a spin-out works. They have to give the shareholders the stock by law. They own the company. The shareholders is a simple mathematical division of one divided by the other. I knew if Palm opened at 150, that would put 3Com shares at 225 fast. I would be worth $10 million, maybe more. The morning of March 10, 2000 came. I was up all night, could not sleep. I was like a kid on Balco Christmas. I told you would see it again. I knew Mike would be there early at the lab. He had a steak or two. I was there at 5 a.m. on the way from the big house in West Weber. I had a talk with myself. I thought when the 3Com magnificent spin out and gives the Palm shares to their owners, the 3Com shareholders, 3Coms, will plummet. But I knew they could take up to a year to do this by law. And I had a lot could happen between now and then. I told myself, hedge your position. Buy some way out of the money 6 months puts. This would truly be the biggest mistake of my life. I went in the lab. Mike opened it up for me. I was on the phone already to Anthony, trying to position all trades. The firm I was freelancing for was buying the stock and very little of the derivatives, options. I was working on commission. I knew the commission I had coming due me was about $300,000, due April 1st. So I thought to myself, you have a check coming for $300,000, so hold your calls and take a shot of a lifetime. So I got on my screen, and my friend and student, Jay Cozier, came in and stayed right next to me. He said, Kev, are you going to take any of the profits off the table? Dr. Manson was standing there, and Mike was glued to his computer screen. Dozens gathered around. What is going to happen on the open? I heard 150, which everyone said, no way. I said, I have been in this business of trading derivatives since I was 14 years old. I'm telling you, I have never seen hype like this before. This thing is going to open over 150. Mike says, it does. You are going to be the richest young guy in the country. I told Jake I'm pulling $240,000 off the table right now. So I placed the order. The trade was so intense. You had to market order and just wait. The confirmations were going to be delayed by pure volume. The option market and the CBOA floor were insane. Finally it came. You got to remember, I worked on the CBOA floor. I had had a serious relationship with the writers of the options. Finally it came through. I had got a good price. $260,000 was made from $1,700 in 5 months. I still had close to $600 writing. Again, I knew I had a check coming for $300,000 coming and another $260,000. I was set. I told Jake I should buy $40,000 worth of July puts at the 50 strikes. I went to the CBO's pricing page. They were ridiculous price, which I knew it would be, as I was the only one who was thinking of the actual spin out. I put market order for $35,000 worth. That moment was the simple keystroke that changed my entire life. I knew the market was fast and should take my chances with the market order. But I had been preaching to my students for months, never place a market order in a fast market. You will get screwed every time. Remember, they were crooks then. They were big-time crooks. I'd went to Spitzer. He and I had having it out. There were a lot of them were trade on the Amex, and the Amex, the old curbside trade, which is right behind the Trinity Church and Alexander Hamilton's grave. They are crooks, and I knew that. I worked there. I dealt with these crooked animals. A few moments later, bang, there it was. And as an open of $170, North one, I'm like, oh my God, I'm filthy stinking rich. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree on You Got It, Balco. Jake said, you are rich. Well, the crooks that pumped the IPO to the stratosphere, and which most of you like the stratosphere in Vegas, folks, we're not going to just let a 500% one-day profit sit there. Everyone was selling as fast as their fingers could move. The arbitrage had no time to fill. It was too fast. The 170 price in minutes was 120. 3Com price. Com was the ticker symbol of the 3Com, sorry. Went from 140 to 80 in seconds. Jake said, did the puts fill? I said, please, please let the puts fill. I was literally begging out loud. Malk walked in and said, Eric B., the CEO of Bartholomew, that crook of 3Com, is going to be interviewed on CNBC in just a few minutes. The neo-ignorant investment public and the street somehow were confused about investors. Big institutions, long-term institutions, were in neo-ignorance land. They somehow believed that it was the CEO's call, and as did the neo-ignorant president of 3Com, CNBC, who, by the way, is the most ignorant people in the country today, bar none. So out the side door of the lab to the TV, here it came. Eric Bartholomew, will the 3Com shareholders get the Palm stock, and how much and when? Believe it or not, this is the moment the technology revolution, the greatest financial and innovation revolution this world has ever, only revealed by the Industrial Revolution, only rivaled by the Industrial Revolution in the beginning of the century, this, the ending of the same century, the 20th century, was ending the same way it started.